Okay, today we have a customized video for Stoxpoker.com, a fantastic site that I'm very happy to be affiliated with now. And the first thing that we need to do is look at some prelims. And it's not going to be this game. We're going to do games starting with the next video. In this first one, though, we need to discuss equity. And equity is the key thing in sitting goes, because let's say that you start off with $1,000 buy-in and 1,000 chip stacks. Then in the beginning you're exchanging $1 per chip, and yet if you win, you cash out all 10,000 chips, and yet you don't win $10,000. So even if we have a 10-man game, and you win 50%, that's $5,000, you're paying $1 a chip in the beginning and only cashing out 50 cents a chip at the end. So why does this happen? Well, that's because in any tournament, chips decline in value. Okay, the more you have, the less each individual one is worth, and vice versa. Now, this is kind of abstract, but the great thing about the Sngman101 is we can quantify this very concretely. Now, equity is the term for the dollar value of chips. And since we want to maximize the dollars we win rather than the chips we win, there is a wonderful thing called the Independent Chip Model, or ICM, which is going to take chip decisions and automatically convert them into dollar decisions. And this is exactly what we want. And the program we're going to use to do that is commercially available software that I use for all my games, and it's called Sngman101 Wizard. And let's go right to it here. So that was just a game we had on in the background. And now we're going to look, and let's suppose that it's five-handed. Okay, so Wizard is going to give us all the parameters, and we're going to see which hands we need to shove with. Okay, so we're starting off with pocket aces, and hopefully we can all agree that, yes, indeed, you win money shoving with aces. But let's look at more specifically what this programmer tells us, and what kind of threshold we would need to shove, and all this good stuff. Okay, the first thing is the numbers that it's telling us. Now, Ek push and Ek fold are your equity when you shove and fold. Now, it's giving us as a percentage of the total prize pool. And it's very hard to think concretely when you think in terms of percents. You want to think in terms of actual dollar amounts. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pretend that we're always playing $100 Sngman101s. Okay, maybe you play a good deal less, you could play more, it doesn't matter. And that they're always 10-man. So we have a prize pool of $1,000. That means that all we have to do is multiply these percentages by 1,000. So Ek fold would be $120.30. Ek push should be $149.30. So even if you're not playing these buy-ins, and they could be 9-man or whatever, that's going to be by far the easiest way to think about it. Now, the first thing that we note is that our chip stack is 1,500, okay? And if we fold, in fact, we have 1,400, and this is a star Sngman101, so we started off with 1,500 chips. If we fold, our initial equity, of course, is 100, or 105, as the case may be. And yet, if we fold, we have 120, even though we have fewer chips than we initially started off with. Now, that is pretty surprising, in a sense, because we have fewer chips and yet higher equity. The reason, of course, is because 4 guys have been eliminated. And with every eliminated player, you gain equity, because there's one fewer guy who can finish in the money. Okay, that's the first thing to note. And the second thing is that in this particular situation, we win $29 by shoving. So obviously, though, it would be a huge error to fold pocket aces. Okay, again, nothing new there. Let's take a more marginal hand. It says 10-7 offsuit. And again, we're making money, okay? We're still making close to $11. Now, this may seem surprising because 10-7 off isn't the strongest hand. And it's predicated on the big blind's calling range. So we see that it's assuming he's calling with any decent offsuit ace, pretty much any suited ace, pretty much any pocket pair, and the high suited kings. Well, you might say that that seems a little narrow. And indeed, when he is calling with that narrow a range, we're correct to push with 100% of hands. Okay, so not just 10-7, but even to 3 off. Okay, should be positive equity, and indeed it is. We win nearly $8 by pushing with the worst hand in heads up, which is deuce 3 offsuit. And now we ask, let's say if he's calling more wide, okay? So how wide do you think he's going to call? Well, he's got 2,000 chips. He's not going to be calling with, any jack and just about any hand. He's going to have some standards here. And I would say that a range like this looks fairly loose, okay? He's calling with any ace, just about any king, any decent queen, any pocket pair, any Broadway cards. So let's say 37%. And now, of course, deuce 3 is incorrect. But let's look at 10-7. It's still not good enough. Jack 10 works. Okay, so now we can see, though, the exact range. And Wizard's going to tell us specifically. And we see that it's any pocket pair, any ace, pretty much any king, any decent queen, most good jacks, as well as mid-suited connectors and up. So with a stack, effective stacks of about 7 blinds, you're correct to shove very widely. Okay, almost half the hands you're dealt here, you would want to shove against this player. And a lot of guys won't call that loose. I mean, would you call with king 4 offsuit for most of your chips? Most likely not. Some of you would. It depends on style. And in general, though, you're correct to shove a lot wider than you'd usually think from the small blind. Okay, so in this situation, we're winning about $4, and that's pretty nice. Okay, so it's correct to shove very wide against the narrow calling big blind, and also it's surprisingly you're correct to shove against many wide calling big blinds. And we can adjust the stack size and make it bigger or smaller. Okay, so with a larger stack, you would want to shove more narrow. And if you're very short stacked with 3 or 4 blinds, you'd shove pretty much any 2 cards. Now let's look at this from the perspective of the big blind. So we can make ourselves the big blind, and we'll do that. Okay, what do we want to give ourselves? Let's say Jack 6 offsuit. And we need to tell the computer that the small blind is shoving on us. And these can be any positions. We can do it from the button, the cutoff, and as long as it's a preflop all in, we can analyze it. Okay, so now the small blind is shoving on us, and the question is, what kind of a hand do we need to call? Well, the answer is we need a very good one, okay? Pretty much any mid pocket pair, high pocket pair, or solid ace. And this is assuming he's shoving with 25% of hands. Now, 25%, okay. So we need, because this is for most of our chips. I mean, if we fold here, we have a pretty solid chance of making it into the money. Okay, our equity, if we fold, is nearly $150. And that's because not only do we have an above average chip stack, but because 4 guys have been eliminated, and we're looking pretty good. So we don't want to risk a lot of our chips, because that's a substantial amount of equity. And the question now is, let's say that he's shoving very wide. Okay, because let's say he's looked at this program and he knows, hey, we're correct to fold with just about every hand, and he wants to exploit that. So he says, well, I'm going to shove with anything but total trash. Okay, I'd say top 80%. Well, now we're still correct to call with only not even the top 50% of hands. We still want a definite edge here, and in particular, even King Deuce doesn't qualify. Okay, we need, if we're playing suited connectors, 9-10 suited is the minimum. Jack 9 would be the minimum face card hand we'd play. And that's pretty tight, but that is what we need to make a plus equity call. So with the Jack 6 here, we're losing nearly $10, and that would be a pretty significant mistake in a $100 buy-in. So the moral here is that you are correct to fold against a narrow shoving small blind and against a wide shoving big blind. And that can be, it's often more intuitive than when you're shoving wide, but everything comes back down to equity. Now, let's say that we take this guy who's again shoving with about 25%, okay? And a lot of more passive players, this is a good range. This is a pretty accurate range. And let's say that we take a hand that we should not be shoving with, and we should not be making the call. So Queen King is one that we should not be making the call with, according to Wizard, based on this 25% range. And with Queen King, we're losing close to $7 with our $100 10-man mono. And the question is, okay, we're correct to fold because equity, we lose equity. But now, what if we look at chips? No, you usually don't want to do that. Oops, let's close that table up. Because, it's not, we want dollars rather than chips. But maybe you're playing a multi-table tournament, maybe we're disinterested. And of course, from a chip perspective, a King-Queen is a much above average hand, and we're correct to call. And now we're going to be making, chip-wise, a decent number of chips. And the important thing here, of course, is that chip and equity decisions are very different. And that is the main thing that we're going to be looking at. In every future video, I'm going to be telling you how to make the most money possible in a given play. And often that will not be the most chips possible because money and chips are very different. And I'm sorry to keep on harping on this, but it's the most crucial idea in Senegal gameplay. And we're going to be looking at Wizard a lot and analyzing hands. And we need to have this very solid framework. So the last thing I want to do here is show a couple more things we can do with Wizard. Now, you can quiz yourself and just say, okay, choose a level of difficulty, and average is fine. And you can have Wizard quiz you and make decisions. Do we call? Do we fold? That kind of a thing. So quiz mode is good. But a better thing to do is to actually look at your own hand histories. And that's what I'm going to be doing after my own videos. And that's what I do when I actually play my games. Is I look back and I say, did I make a mistake in these high blind push fold decisions where the real money is being decided? So let's look at an old tournament that I've pre-brought up. And okay, one thing here is that what Wizard is going to do is tell us every single hand and our cards, our position, how many players are left, stack sizes, action to us, what we do, etc. Yellow means that you may have made a mistake as borderline, green is a clear success, and red is a clear error. So what I'm going to usually do is I'm going to look and I'm going to tell the program only to show my likely errors. So we go to General, Hand Filter, Show Possible Errors, click on OK. And now instead of like 100 hands, we only have 2 left, and we can take a look at them and see whether we like what's going on here. Now the most important thing is that you don't just take these ranges for granted, okay? So now it's saying that because what happened here was that we folded, okay? And it's saying we should have shoved. Now, if he's calling with 16%, which is pretty narrow, that's indeed correct. And we would be winning over $7 by shoving. So, maybe this guy is a decent player, and he's going to be calling slightly wider. I don't know, maybe 20% is what I'm thinking. And even with 20%, this is still a shove. We're still making close to $5. And even with one of the weakest hands in heads-up play, blind on blind heads up, deuce 5 offsuit, we're correct to shove if he's calling as wide as 20%. And that's pretty significant. So I would see a hand like that, I'd say, okay, when we're dealing with about 7 blinds deep, I need to be shoving extremely wide from the small blind. And indeed, that's usually a pretty good perspective to have. And how wide would he have to be calling with before this was no longer profitable? Well, let's see, 35 would be a fold, and it's going to be somewhere in between. Maybe if he's calling with somewhere in the upper 20s, okay, so any decent king, and now we see that it's very close. And then we look back, and we say, okay, any other hands that we misplayed from this one? And here we have another small blind hand with the same characters, and in this one, Again, it's a more narrow one, saying a $6.30 difference. But 10-8 isn't bad because when you shove with 10-8, your cards are usually alive if you get called. Usually you're not going to be dominated, and it's pretty rare he's going to have an overpair. So in this situation, 18% looks about right for kind of a tight, aggressive winning player, and we'd be correct to shove. So that's our introduction to maximizing money-making decisions and sitting a wizard. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we're going to be playing a lot of games right here on Stoxpoker.com. Okay, signing off.